Welcome everyone to day 3 of the Open Ed Week 2024 series of presentations that we're giving. We're very excited about how the week has been progressing so far, and also looking forward to the week being over so we can actually relax a little bit because we have a fairly aggressive schedule. I noticed several names here, people who've attended earlier presentations. I'm very excited to see you, and also those that are new to the LibreVerse, or at least certainly the presentations that we've been giving so far. So the topic of this conversation is focusing on remixing, which has been a topic that we've been particularly focused on since 2018 or so, where we want to be able to build an infrastructure in order to capitalize on the content that we have today. So I just want to give a little bit of an overview with a few PowerPoint presentations, and then we're going to transition into live activities on the site. So I'm going to be talking about predominantly the remixer, although a few aspects around the remixer, which is the tool that we use in the LibreVerse in order to facilitate remixing of content. The It is part of the Commons Conductor, and the Commons Conductor is one component of the LibreVerse, which is an ecosystem of multiple technologies in order to advance the goals of our project. It's easy in order to get overwhelmed by the power and scope of the LibreVerse, and also all the URLs and links associated with the different components of the LibreVerse. So for those of you that don't want to be daunted by that, I encourage you, and go back one. I encourage you to bookmark or write down this URL. That is the URL that goes to the map or the launch pad that we use for the greater LibreVerse. This is a snippet of the launch pad, which will show the different components associated with the LibreVerse, and the libraries that are also part of the LibreVerse, the 16 libraries that are independently operating. Yesterday, we talked a little bit about ADAPT and the Commons Conductor technology, and I think we discussed Studio a little bit. We're going to be discussing again today, focusing on Remixer. And the Remixer is a technology that's right now hosted both on the libraries and also on the Conductor. Eventually, it's going to be merged into the Conductor. So just to make sure that we're on the same page, I'd like to give out our mission statement. We're implementing a community-built platform for the construction, curation, adoption, and adaption of OER that is comprehensive and can be curated at multiple levels. Each of these bolded words here, the 3 C's, are particularly important in terms of the greater picture of what we want to be able to pursue. And each of the words that are in the parentheses, the construction, curation, adoption, adaption, are more practical manifestations of how we address those goals. Because we are a community-built platform, it means that anybody and everybody who's interested in order to contribute to the platform, whether that happens to be design, development, coding, or just contributions of OER or updating OER, and also being part of our curation board, we welcome with open arms. Our primary focus is on OER and distributing OER to the masses in order to advance many aspects of education, both by improving education, but also by reducing the costs for students in order to get that education, in order to help equity issues. For OER, for the topic of OER, we can define that in a variety of different ways. We have a general consensus in the community, but there's a little bit of nuances at different points. For the sake of this conversation, I'm going to describe OER as content that's freely available for students to access and freely available for faculty to customize. But there's a lot more nuance than just that for describing OER. The LibreTexts project as a whole is a very comprehensive project. We have an interest in order to address a wide scope of different fields, both horizontally across academia and also vertically from K-12 all the way up to graduate level. So we follow a no gap left behind policy. While I'm a professor of chemistry at the University of California, Davis, I have a strong interest in order to address everything that that we can actually advance with our infrastructure. We follow a no tech left behind policy, which means as emerging technologies become available, we integrate it into our platform so that faculty and students can use those resources without having to go through the barriers of implementing those technologies, which can oftentimes be daunting. Because many technologies are not designed with a front-end user experience or UI infrastructure in place. And lastly, the content that we create or that we host and distribute is meant to be stored in a curated repository, or what I refer to as a curatatory. In other words, because we're in academia, we recognize that the buck doesn't stop at publishing or hosting content. It's a continual cycle that just continually moves forward. And we want to be part of that cycle in order to facilitate, again, the goals that we have advanced here. So in order to address that, our technologies are designed around a dynamic living platform or living library that's continually being able to be updated and customized as needed. So the LibreVerse has a variety of different components to it. I introduced this a couple days ago in the first day of Open Ed Week. But what I'm going to be just talking about is largely focusing on the libraries and a specific aspect of the libraries. So before talking about remixing, it's important in order to emphasize why the remixer exists and the underlying philosophy behind the corpus behind the remixer. So the argument that we have been making for a while, which is fairly obvious to anyone who gets involved in the open community right now, is that the OER universe is fragmented. There is OER stored in a variety of different places, and you can find that OER in different repositories or different referatories. The Open Textbook Library, for example, is a referatory that will give you directions to go to somewhere else that stores the content in order to be able to find it. So it's more of a library guide than the actual library. OER Commons is mostly a referatory that operates in the same way, but it does have some capabilities of storing content. OpenStax holds its own content, is not a referatory outside. Merlot referatory, OpenSunny, Galileo, Open Oregon, NOBA, BC Campus, eCampus Ontario, Alberta, Hawaii, Saylor, California State University System, Oregon State University, and numerous other places on the internet. So this is a 5 or 6 year old slide. The key point is that there's OER distributed in a variety of places, and finding OER can oftentimes be difficult. And that's important not just for authors in order to find content to build and remix, but it's important for students in order to be able to capitalize on the corpus of content that they have available, again, predicated on the open licensing of OER. So we felt that this is an issue that needed to be resolved, and there are several approaches that can be used in order to resolve that. One is to build a federated system, so every infrastructure, every platform, every website, every computer that wants to distribute OER can have and adopt the same standards in order to be able to transfer data effectively. In that case, they're not just metadata, but also the content across this federated network. Now, that will, in my opinion, never happen for a variety of reasons. Things are just too fragmented out there. So what we decided to do was the opposite. And instead of trying to build a federated system, we build a centralized infrastructure where we go out and we find OER and we integrate it into our platform. Now, many of the times that we bring into our platform, we have to go through a lot of editing and updating of that content and standardizing that content so that it's easy to remix off of here. So in other words, from the perspective of grabbing other OER into our infrastructure, we're building a bigger box of Legos. Now, we also do our own construction efforts, and we facilitate as partners with other campuses and other teams in order to facilitate making new OER. But the key point is that when it's all centralized and it's all standardized, it facilitates easy remixing. That is easy reconstruction and reuse of the content in order to build new resources. So in this case, I would liken the child here who's making a Lego block or a Lego project would be like an instructor. And if that Lego block or Lego box is big enough, essentially they're only limited by the imagination of the creator here. Now, we're not at that stage yet, but because we have been collecting things for the last 16 years, the corpus of content that faculty have access to exceeds about 950 and close to 950,000 to 1 million pages. We have a long way in order to make that corpus grow to be fully comprehensive, as our mission statement argues. But this is a guiding principle behind the corpus of content that we have. In fact, we're the largest central repository of OER content, or more specifically, OER textbook content available on the internet today. We're also the most popular based on traffic. We've delivered 1.2 billion page views to the corpus of content that we have available, and we look forward to seeing how far that's actually going to be going in the future. So the key aspect in order to build this corpus is to centralize the content, so it's easy to find, standardize the content so it's easy to remix, because it's all in one specific format, all with one specific underlying standard to be able to remix things. If you want to envision a situation that's where non-standardization gets in the way, it's like having a PDF of a document and having to cut and paste from that PDF into a Word document, and you have to go through a lot of standardizations, a lot of cleaning up associated with that content. We do that so that faculty don't need to do that. So the whole point here is to remove the barrier, or at least lower the barrier in terms of effective use of OER. It generates interconvertible resources. You're allowed to make collections off of this, aka textbooks, although you can make mini repositories of things like laboratories or learning objects or visualizations. This provides maximal flexibility. And it also provides maximal curatability, because if something's objectively wrong, you can come in and fix it, and then it's fixed for everybody across the board, instead of having a fragmented infrastructure, such that we have a situation where two people or two steps go forward from advancement, but because other people can't benefit from the advancement, there's one step back. And it's that sort of dance that hurts me when I actually look at the community. So we have this large corpus, an exceedingly large corpus for individuals to tap into and use effectively. And in 2019, we introduced a tool that we called the Remixer, and that's the one that we're going to be using real time here, which is a simple graphical interface to this large corpus where individuals can come and drag and drop content from the corpus of content, that's 950,000 pages of content, into building a book automatically. So the key point is it's a simple GUI interface, or graphical user interface, in order to build a book relatively quickly, again, because the barrier is actually reduced that's connected to that. We were very happy a couple of years ago. We received an Open Excellence Award from Open Ed Global for the development of this remixer, which is open source. So before we actually get into the remixer, I'll just close off this PowerPoint presentation with what I started. We're implementing a community-built platform for the construction, curation, adoption, and adaption of OER that is comprehensive and can be curated at multiple levels. With that, that's the end of this, and I would like to actually go and transition into the remixer so we can get things going. Now, people have different goals when they come to the remixer. I'm not sure if anybody in here has a very targeted scope that they're interested in looking at. If you do, please let me know. Otherwise, I'll just give a general overview associated with how you can remix a resource that's connected to it. So let's spend a moment to see if anyone wants to chime in. And everybody is quiet, so this is just like my class this morning. So Candace is interested in taking a look at this thing. I will start moving forward. If you guys have any specific questions or concerns, make sure you put them in the chat, and I'll do my best in order to address it. Now, in order to use the remixer, let me rephrase that. In order to save the content from the remixer, you need an account in order to do so. However, if you don't have a Libre One account, the account in order to access the LibreVerse, you can still access this without an account. I'm going to paste the link here, and again, you can use this without having an account, but you're just unable to save it. So you're going to be in demo mode. And I pasted the link to the remixer into the chat. So let's discuss a little bit about workflow associated with using the remixer before we discuss the remixer. Anytime anyone wants to create a book on the LibreVerse, they need to first create a conductor page for that book. It's a back-end organizational tool centered on the conductor infrastructure. The conductor is, to my knowledge, the only project management tool designed and optimized for OER. construction. So when you get into your Conductor account, which you can access through the Launchpad right here by clicking Conductor, it comes in here and you have the ability to create a project. I'm not going to create a project. I'm just going to, actually, I might as well create a project. So I'm going to create a project. I'm just calling it Remixing 101. I'm going to create the project, and then I have the ability in order to customize this project. This was a topic of a different video that we'll be hosting next to this video when it's updated on or uploaded to YouTube. We create a book, and this right here is just a simple book. I'm going to add this to chemistry just for general purposes, and the book is titled Remixing 101. So the Conductor page is an organization, and I just created a template page for hosting my book. Now, all the conversation I'm planning on having here is remixing for textbook material. If you're intending on trying to remix or reuse content from files that we host on our system or from homework in our adapt homework system, it has a different approach than what I'm talking about now. And if people are interested, I can certainly discuss that after I go over remixing of content for a textbook. So I've just created a new book. This right here, this textbook link, which used to be what I used to create the book, now will go to the book itself. And when it pulls up here, it's a simple template of a book that has front matter, back matter, and an individual chapter. That's a base default filler chapter off of it. So it's a default book to start building from. All books have front matter and back matter. The front matter has an additional set of properties associated with title, pages, table of contents, licensing, and the back matter has index, glossary, and detailed licensing. If you're interested, I could talk about those things in more detail, but we want to be able to talk about remixing here. So now I have an empty page that I'm able to remix. If you've already created your book, via a different mechanism in the past, that's fine. You can remix from that, but this is the mechanism that we use for remixing. So I'm going to go back to my Conductor page, and under More Tools, I have the Remixer option. I'm going to click on this. It's going to pull up this remixer. Now, as it comes up with here, and things are a little bit slow for some reason or another, it pulls up the remixer. There's a little bit of text here. We've been changing the remixer the last month to month and a half in order to be a little bit more streamlined. I will mention that in our construction manual, which is available online, if you just do a search on construction, you will then see that we have, I'm going to go under developers here. You'll have a series of chapters. There's one chapter explicitly dedicated to remixing existing content. I'm going to paste a link to that chapter right here. And it goes through the steps that I'm essentially doing here in person, but it goes through it with some prose exposition rather than verbal exposition. Okay, so let's get back to the remixer. This is the remixer. Sorry, let me pull up the empty remixer that I have. This is the remixer I pulled up of the book that I created, which again consists of a front matter, back matter, and an empty chapter. Now, on the right-hand side is the book that I'm creating. On the left-hand side is the library. So 950,000 pages of content. So you have to dig through in order to find that content and put in here. Now, the first step in terms of remixing is to have a game plan. And the game plan largely consists of saying, what content in the library do we want in order to put into our book? And that right there can be relatively simple by saying, I want to build a book that resembles an OpenStax book. So you bring in an OpenStax book, and then you can start to finesse it. In more complicated cases, you may come in and say, well, I like 10 different books dealing with calculus. One of them may be OpenStax, but we have lots of other calculus books that are on there. And you may say, I want to have chapter 1 that comes from OpenStax, and chapter 2 coming from Stang's original book, or chapter 3 coming from other sources, or coming in and saying, I want section 1.1 to be OpenStax, but 1.2 to be from a different resource. The key point off of here is that in order to start remixing, you need to have some sort of game plan of saying what content here is organized in in the order that you want in your book. And that process of making a game plan is what we refer to as a remixing map. There's a link up here to a remixing map page, which is pasted into the chat. It is the same, it's one of the components of the remixing chapter. And the idea, again, behind it is that you want to be able to recognize or identify what pages you want, and in what order do you want them to be, and or if you want to rename the title of the pages. Before showing a more remixing maps, I want to emphasize a key aspect associated with remixing, and that is that the remixer is designed in order to facilitate remixing of chapters and or pages. It's not designed in order to edit the content on the pages. That's a different skill set requiring going to the library and pulling up the editor and editing the content on the library. This right here, the remixer, is only the pages. This is akin to your computer where your filing system is meant in order to organize the files. But if you want to be able to edit the stuff in the files, you need to use a system in order to open it up and manipulate it. So while remixing as a general concept involves copying, pasting, editing, and restructuring content up to the word level, the remixer itself is designed only for addressing pages. So let's look at a remixing map. I will paste a link up here for a remixing map that came from actually this didn't actually there's a map, I'm sorry, the link is not there. I'll provide an Excel form on the side here in a moment. So again, the remixing map is an individual exercise typically, unless it's a team that's remixing, in which you go through the content in the library, looking at this page, this page, this page, of this book, and this book, and this book, and trying to say, I like this one, I like this one, I want to organize it in this way. Now, the remixing map can take a variety of different forms. It doesn't matter what they can be. They can be written in a Google Doc. They could be hand written on a piece of paper. They can be written on toilet paper or Excel. It doesn't matter. The key point is to give you some idea about how you want to organize the content and put it together. Now, the remixer can be done and loaded multiple times, so you don't have to be perfect. And rarely does someone know exactly how they want their book to be organized. You just need to be able to have some sort of starting point in order to be able to do that. You don't go to the remixer raw. So here's a couple examples of remixing maps. This is one that was created around learning outcomes, where they identified, to be honest, I'm not so comfortable with this organization. Let me switch down here to this version of the remixing map. And the idea, again, is to say the things that are in yellow on this Excel form, and I'm going to copy that Excel form here if you guys are interested in using that specifically. And the things in yellow constitutes the book that they are creating. The things and the pages in green are where those pages were or are on the library itself. So in this case here, this is a introductory chemistry course from Lubbock Christian University. They came in and made this really quite beautiful document in which they organized 14 chapters. I think there are probably even more of their book. They've organized the titles of the chapters of what they wanted to do and the number of sections that they expect. And they basically say, well, they're going to remix and make section 1.1 of their book. That's going to be 1.1 from this book up here, this introductory chemistry book. That's a text map. It's not by Tro. It's similar to Tro. It's structured around Tro. So they say, okay, 1.1, 1.1. 1.2 of their book is 1.2 of that source book. 1.3 of their book is now 2.5 of their source book. Again, the point is you don't have to adopt the entire structure of one book. You can mix and match as necessary. And if you actually take a look at here, you'll see there's lots of structure where they grabbed from the second chapter of this book and they made it to the first chapter. Here they grabbed the fourth chapter and sixth chapter, made it to the second chapter. Here they got from 17 and 4 and changed it around a variety of structures off of it. And sometimes they grabbed from different sources, although this brown remap and such. But the key point is to be able to organize this and put this in the structure that you want off of here. Candace, I will show you this, but yes, it automatically renumbers the remixer will renumber things. So the bigger picture in terms of remixing is not to use the remixer. It's to actually recognize what you want, in what order do you want it. And that is part of the point of having things centralized, to be able to identify that and make it work. So, like I said, it could take a wide variety of different formats, and you can structure it in a variety of different ways. It doesn't really matter which one you want to do, as long as you have a game plan for working off of it. And once the remixing map is done, once you've done the remixing map, carries no real utility anymore, because it's already mapped into the book that you've created. So there were a few questions Candace asked about auto numbering. I mentioned that the remixer will auto number for you. She also asked, is this example just one from the OER source? Correct. You have to, yeah. So this book right here, if you actually look, most of it's by Tro, just restructured. However, a few sections on here comes from Brown's book. And there's here's from an OpenStax book, here's from a Ball book. So it's mostly one book that they liked, but they augmented it with different things. There are people who come in here and they may grab from 10 different books in a wide variety of different ways in order to be able to generate what you want. You could do whatever you like. If the book that you're working with is largely fine for you, then go for it. I oftentimes argue that textbooks are not tube socks. One size doesn't fit all. I don't know faculty members that are 100% happy with their books. They may be 90% happy with their books, but they may want to tweak it up a little bit in order to be able to advance it, or they may be completely hate their books and they want to completely revamp everything up to. The remixer provides both mechanisms, or both case approaches for things. So anyways, let's get back. I'm going to get rid of this, and I'm going to go to the remixer that I pulled up here and show you how we drag and drop. So in this case here, I'm going to delete my first chapter. Actually, let me start here in describing the remixer. So the remixer is relatively simple technology. At the top level right here, gives you a little bit of information. You don't see this default copy mode. That's because I have a more powerful account than what you guys have. But it's just largely the remixing name. And a few features here. If you want to flip on the show tutorial, it will provide some information here. Actually, it looks like something happened with that tutorial. Okay, here we go. It'll provide contextual information as you start to move forward in order to advance that. So if you need a little bit of assistance that's real time directly into the remixer, you can do that. I'm going to skip over that because it takes up real estate. Actually, that's not the right button. It takes up real estate, and I want to be able to show emphasize the remixing things. The other option here is the auto number. So the auto number, when it's toggled, and it's by default toggled on, as you drag and drop content from the libraries into the remixing, it will automatically renumber them in a sequential manner. So this is going into what Candace mentioned momentarily. So it makes it easier, so you don't have to worry about changing numbers for titles as you reorganize it. The other nice thing about the technology that we have, and it's not quite native to Remixer, it's more the way that we organize the libraries, is that if we do things properly, changing the title, more specifically changing the number on the title, will change the figure numbers, the table numbers, and equation numbers respectively. So the intent is essentially making it so you don't have to try to coordinate a lot of the complexities that's involved in terms of mixing things together. Let the remixer organize and control them and handle 90% of what you want. I'm not saying you're not going to be wanting to go in and edit the pages, but at least this gives you the infrastructure in order to facilitate the bulk of what you want to do. A few of these things are things that are typically not used. We're going to be hiding them. If you want, if you are in demo mode, for those of you that don't have an account, this we've mentioned demo mode, you have the ability to remix, and then you can save a map. It's a file that will actually save the remixing map, and you can then reload it and continually manipulate it and use it in this way. And then if you want to implement it, you can then share it off to someone who doesn't have who has editing access or saving access, or you can get an account and reload that. This little button up here is also rarely used, but this is if your computer crashes on you or your power goes down. It's saving every minute or so, the snapshot of what you're doing in your computer on the cookies, basically. It's called local storage. And if your computer crashes, you can come back and click that up and it'll load it back up for you. So anyways, um, there are some auto number options here. I don't want to pull that up just yet. There are just a few aspects because you may want to number from in different ways, or you may want to start at a different number or things like that. And I want to focus more on the gritty details, which is this stuff down below, the two panels I talked about, and this black bar. So at any time we want, we can do start over or restart, and that basically reloads everything. And if you think that you create a mistake or monstrosity and you just want to erase it, you can go about doing that. So the remixer is a tool that you're using to reorganize and build a new book. As you start to drag and drop stuff, as you start to do stuff, it does not save it on our servers automatically. You're just rearranging and organizing it on your computer, and then you want to save to server, and that will then push your changes to the server, to the book on our library. And the intent of that is it gives you the opportunity to rearrange and restructure and do stuff, and then you say, I like this, now make this happen. Or if you were Jean-Luc Picard, make it so. And then it works. Actually, that's probably what I should rename that button. We have a few additional buttons on here. This right here will generate a new page. So if I click a button right here, it makes an empty page down below it. You'll notice that the empty page is colored green. And that means that once I save the server, it will create that page. So the color coding gives me the ability in order to get a bigger picture of what is created versus what is already existing. Everything in black is already existing. And with the exception of when I'm highlighting on it, it turns blue. Everything in green will be created when I decide that I want to create it. So I can come in and create a whole bunch of these pages. At any time, I can come in and I can delete them using the delete page. And because these pages didn't exist, they will just disappear. If I decide I want to delete something that does exist, like this back matter chapter, it will it'll turn it red and make a slash through it. Again, the point is for you to get an idea about what it is that's going to happen when you save to server. So that's largely the two aspects that you get here are green and red, but there's a third one that comes in, and that's orange, and that's if you change the title of something. I'll show you that when I actually pull up the remixer after I manipulate it a little bit here. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this empty chapter because I don't care about this. I'm going to undelete that back matter, and now I've deleted that chapter. So now I want to drag and drop. So let's say I want to grab a chapter from a specific book. Does anyone have a book that you may want to pull in, or should I just pick one randomly? Candace asked for a business book. So I have up here the option to select the library I want to pull these books from. So we have 16 libraries. If I go to the business library, I will obviously find the business books there. We store our law books on there too. So we should probably rename this business and law. I can go through the bookstore, the bookshelves. These are sections or components of the library. Candace, do you have a specific business topic that you'd like me to grab from? You can also grab access to the microphone if you desire. Or should I randomly pick? Okay, I'm going to assume that means randomly picking. So in this case here, let's say I want to grab, um, let's say finance. So I can go through the finance bookshelf, and these are the series of books that are out here. Again, you don't want to remix until you review the books that you want to pull from, knowing that that's the books that you really care about. So let's say you're interested in Principles of Finance by OpenStax. You can come in and take chapter 1, and I'm just going to grab hover over that chapter. I'm going to click the button and I'm going to drag it and put it over here. And now I've just brought that chapter over with all the constituent components to that chapter. You can see them all right here. Now they're all green, which means that I haven't saved it on the server yet. I'm just working up the map right here. I can come in and say, I don't want chapter 1.5, 1.6, or 1.7. And you notice as I deleted them, the numbers then get rearranged and ordered because I have auto number set up. Now let's say I then want, I'm going to close that just for fun. I then want chapter 8. And I bring that over here. And now chapter 8 came over, and what was chapter 8 here becomes chapter 2. Again, the renumber in action, and all the constituent parts here, instead of 8.1, become 2.1, and moving over in that way right there. And that's a straightforward way of dragging and dropping. I just basically did it at the chapter level. I can go through and say, well, I want to grab this individual finance book, and I want this page 5.3, and I'm going to put 5.3, creating a comprehensive budget, in between why it matters and perpetuities. And I just dragged it over here. It was originally 5.3. It's now 2.2, again, because the remixer is on, the auto number is on. If I turn this off and I were to drag budget variances over here, you notice that it doesn't then auto number. As you see, there are reasons that you may not necessarily want to auto number. However, most likely you do so. There was a question that came up in the chat. If combining two books, do students see that the different chapters are coming from different sources? No. It acts like you brought it over. There may be some indications on the page itself that says it's part of a greater book, although that's actually not that common. Most of the time, we have this thing structured so that these represents quanta that you're able to move and rearrange without having serious issues off of that. You probably have to polish a little bit in order to make sure the content of each page makes sense for things, but that's not what the remixer is designed for doing. So that's fine and dandy. Let me save to server. And now I've saved to server. And the save to server is a two-step process. The first step just gives you an overview of what to expect once you save it. So you can say, well, what's going on? Do I like this? I'm making 27 new pages. This tells me if some of them are renamed. And this tells me that I'm deleting one page. I'm not sure what page I deleted. And then I can look here and see that I deleted the first chapter, and that's why it happened. I'm going to save to server. And this right here may take a few minutes or a few seconds, depending upon how many pages are created and how you're structuring it, because it's doing a lot of stuff and dragging it over and such. And that right there is not an instantaneous process. So while it's doing that, which I know is going to be done in 1 minute, I noticed that there are a few comments in the chat, so I'm going to address that. Candace also asked, will the user interface warn us if we duplicate bringing in the same chapter twice? No. So the remixer is no logic. You can come in and drag things as you see fit. And if you rearrange, if you duplicate things, it's under the assumption that you intended on duplicating those things. When you remix or when you add questions into courses in Adapt homework, that right there then starts to have issues with being able to track you if you're duplicating questions or you're bringing in questions that were used in a different part of your course in order for you to be aware of that you're duplicating content out there, but not at the textbook level. The second question here is, if the chapter links to another chapter in the same book, we don't bring in the second chapter reference. What happens to so the links don't die. The links will still be preserved to the original content of your thing. So we try to make and try to update the content in the pages to be as self-contained as possible. Now, there are many people who like to have books that have lots of hyperlinks going into lots of things like that, and it's difficult in order to extricate those things and use them as individual quanta than it is in other in resources that we have indeed made somewhat autonomous. So I tend to recommend people not to cross-reference unless they absolutely have to in order to facilitate better remixing. This is also one of the reasons that will come up in a second here, is that the figure numbers that we typically use, if we have implemented it, and we haven't implemented this on every single content that comes in because we're getting a lot of stuff coming in, is we like to have equation numbers. Let me phrase it. We like to have page numbers based on a triple number sequence. So in other words, section 2.9, the first page of 2.9 is 2.9.1. Next one is 2.9.2. So you have an additional complexity off here than having it starting from the beginning of the book. But that right there makes it very easy for faculty, for students to understand where to go to in the book. When you actually say, go to section or go to page 2.8.1, and you can go straight to it instead of trying to dig around and alter and try to find it, the digital version of flipping through pages of a book in order to find these things. The same thing also applies to images. So we number the images based on the section. So the first image of section 2.9 will be 2.9.1. And again, this starts to address what Candace mentioned in terms of if you were to number it sequentially across the book, it makes it difficult in order to take a section and move it from one book to another book because it's not self-contained and such. So the additional numbering, which is a little bit more awkward than having a standard single number or double number sequence, provides a lot of power and flexibility to facilitate remixing. Nothing says that once you create the book that you don't come in and you change it and make it all more traditional, but this is a convenient way in order to facilitate that. Okay, so this is done. It's created a bunch of pages. You see them all green. I'll talk about what transcluded and fork means in a moment. It's renamed titles. I must have changed the numbering system of that, and it deleted that first chapter, that empty default chapter that's down there. So if I click down here, and I'm just going to open this into a new panel, it will pull up the book. And this is the book that I've created. If I go under contents here, I can see all the sections that I pulled in right here, including even the 5.5 that I had dragged in here, but it automatically numbers it. So instead of it being up here, it moves it down here. Probably wouldn't hurt for us to be able to implement an infrastructure to facilitate ordering even when auto numbering is not in place. And that's the gist of remixing. Again, the point is that once you have a game plan, you can then basically recreate your book relatively quickly. You can reload the book and continually update it as you see fit. So I'm going to reload the book. I'm going to revise the book and just revise the current text. And we'll get rid of select another text. So it's just going to be revising it. And it pulls up the whole book and it's from scratch again. So you notice now instead of green, these things are black because the pages exist. And I have the ability to come in and say, I don't like that page and I don't like that page. And work off of it. You'll notice that since the auto number is turned off, it goes from 1.1, 1.2, skips 1.3 and goes to 1.4. If I were to flip this thing off, I'm just going to give it a little bit of a nudge. It will then restructure it. And by deleting that page, I'm going to renumber this page from 1.4 to 1.3, and that's what orange represents. So orange changes the title or the metadata, but it's not deleting or creating that question. So again, it's part of the color code that's connected to that. So I used to call this remixing, but it's essentially continually updating and reorganizing your book. And you can, if you just care about organizing your book, you'd focus on the right side. But if you continually want to add content from the corpus remixing, you can go about doing that. So there was another question from Candace. Can you search through all the libraries for a keyword, for example, loan amortization? You don't do that on the remixer. You do that in the, right now we have it set up that you can only do a search through the library. So in your case, you're going to be doing a search through the business library. Did I save this in business? I think I saved this in chemistry. So let me pull up the business library, and then you can do a search directly here. The new skin that we're going to be releasing lets you do a search through your book, and it'll let you do a search through a library or a bookshelf. But right now we don't have a search through all 100,000, all close to 1 million pages, but we're working on ways in order to bring it together. Searches can be mysterious. So in this case here, I did a search on loan amortization, and you can see a handful of pages. Like here's an OpenStax book, another OpenStax book, a Biggle book, OpenStax, Robinson, that has that term in it somewhere, and such. This is ranked by what we think is a priority connected to this, and then you can just go through and take a look at that. So anyways, I digress off of that. Peg asked another question. Can you pull a chapter but make it a subsection of a chapter you already have moved into the remixer? Yes. So the remixer will allow you to create subsections. Like, for example, let's say I grab this chapter right here, and now I've made it into a chapter and then a subchapter. You notice the numbering just continues on. So it doesn't really, the remixer doesn't care about the numbering based off of whether it's a page or it's a chapter. So this is what you might do if you want to have units and then chapters and then sections below that. It's also not unheard of that people will have exercises, for example, below each section. So you'll have something like, here's the content on the page, and here are the questions that you want to have connected to the content on the page. This is in contrast to having a section at the end of the book or the end of the chapter that just summarize lots of homework in order to, or exercises in order to address. We've remapped a lot of the OpenStax math books in that way. So that's making sub pages. I will make and you can continue to make this. You can make actually quite a monstrosity off of here. I do have a recommendation that people, unless there's a strong need to deviate from the canonical stance, the canonical stance is course, chapter, let me phrase that, book, chapter, section. It's a nice little 2-level below the book perspective. You start adding units, you start adding sub pages, or you start getting more complicated with sub pages. And learning management systems may have a problem with that if you're trying to take that book and push it into your learning management system. For example, Canvas will only accept 2 levels, period. So what we do, if you actually export it into Canvas, we'll take take the complexity and we'll map it into 2 levels. So you have all the pages, so that Canvas will accept all the pages, and that's just a fact off of that. If you're using other learning management systems, simply Blackboard, at least the older version of Blackboard, didn't have that sort of problem, and they allowed the hierarchy to be reflected into the learning management system that you put into it. But my recommendation is to try to keep it with chapters and sections rather than having subsections or subchapters or units and other things like that. But it is possible for doing so. I'm going to revert this. And that's largely remixing. Now I want to go back to a slightly different concept. I want to look at one of these pages that we created. So you may remember when we had an overview of things, I had, when it was creating pages, it created pages either as transcluded or forked. Those were the 2 letters that were in, or the 2 words that were in green. And this adds a bit of complexity associated with it. So this is the book that I created, or this is the chapter I created in the book that I had. I'm going to click on this, and it pulls up. This is actually not good. And something may have happened in our code base associated with cross-library linking, because this is the chemistry library. And I need to take a look and find out why we are having problems with this, but I'll fix it very soon. Let me bring in to show this, I want to bring in a chapter from the chemistry book. So I'm going to grab general techniques. I'm going to put it in between the 2 here. Auto number is set up. I'm going to save it. I'm going to generate this this book. So it's renaming some of the numbers off of here. Creating things. Again, it takes a little bit of time in order to do. I'm gonna pull up the book itself. Okay, so here's an example of that green term I said that says forked. You're going to see a series of green ones that then say transcluded below it. So any one of these things is actually a hyperlink to go to the page. So I'm just going to go to this page and I'll let the remixer do its stuff. I don't need it in order to discuss what I'm talking about. And what I want to talk about is the concept of transclusion. Now, transclusion is an old term. This is not terribly exciting. Let's go to the next page here. Transclusion is an old term to a concept that you're reasonably comfortable with. Do greasing joint. And the idea behind transclusion is something similar that you have on your computer, where you know that you can have an image, let me phrase that, you can have a file that looks like a file, you move it around, but it's really not a file. It's actually a link to go to the file somewhere else. For example, if you're on a PC, you call it a shortcut. If you're on a Mac, you call it an alias. If you're comfortable with Unix, you call it a symbolic link. The idea is to make something that looks like a file and acts like a file, but really, if you double click on it to access it, it goes somewhere else, or more specifically, it pulls something, the content from somewhere else and brings it in. I presume most of the people are comfortable with that. I don't have much feedback in order to make sure that analogy works well with you guys with a bunch of names. But if that's confusing, let me know. This page right here is transcluded, which means that the content on this page is really stored somewhere else. It doesn't look like it, but it's there. So if I were to edit the page, oh, sorry, something. Oh, this. I went to the original. Uh, oh, I saw what I did. So here's the original. I'm I'm screwy. I went to the original content that was there, not the actual source. So I wanted to remix from, let's say, this book. Here's an example of a multi-layered structure. Here's the page that's on my book. This Remixing 101. And I'm saying this page is transcluded, which means the content on this page is not stored on my page. It's stored on a separate page, the original page that we use to remix. You'll notice that it has this little icon on here. This little icon is meant in order to tell me that it's transcluded. So if I were to try to edit this page, I have a little block that comes up and just tells me that the content on this page is really stored somewhere else. I can click on that somewhere else and it'll open up that page. So if I were to close this page, and it'll show everything that's on this page right here. Things are going a bit slower than we want. So everything that's on this source page is right here on the book that I created, whereas this one represents as transcluded, and this one represents that it's the true content. So what that means is if I were to come in here and I were to edit the content on the source page, it would be reflected over here. The reason for that is that the vast majority of people who remix from books, they don't actually change or want to edit the content on the page themselves. So if you don't want to edit the content here for your book, then why duplicate the content? It just makes the database bigger. But more importantly, it also makes it more difficult to curate, because if I find a mistake on this page right here, the source page, I can come in and fix it. And then everybody else can basically take it, can accept it, or not accept it, but here, for example, you'll see that I have an empty space right here. and I don't want an empty space, so I can delete it. I just did it in HTML. So I edited the source page, and now if I were to refresh this screen, this empty space will go away. So this makes it easier to curate. Now, a lot of people may not like to be tethered in this way. So we have the ability to fork the page by accessing the forker, and that will essentially duplicate the page. So it converts to use a PC analogy, it converts a shortcut into an actual file. And then I can come in and I can edit. So it's like the poem of Walking Down the Road by Browning. You come in and now they're bifurcated so that I can edit this thing completely independent of the source file. And the same thing, I can edit the source file without affecting this thing. There are reasons in which you may want one versus the other, and you have the ability in order to control that as necessary. When you're customizing content, that's why you on the page, that's when you need to fork it. By default, we make everything transcluded, and then before anyone wants to edit the page, they have to fork it and then edit it. And that little extra step provides a mechanism in order to make things faster on the database, but more importantly, makes it easier to curate the content so that if we find mistakes, we can fix it and then everyone can benefit from it. Now, I will mention that most of the content, if you remix from content that's in our central bookshelves, the only people who update the content or edit the content is the development board and the curation board. So they don't go in and they don't change the structure of the page. They'll just update small issues here and there in order to improve it. If you remix from someone else's book, you're then relying on that other person who may come in and say they don't want this image to be there in their book. And because you've tethered to their book, you'll then automatically be reflected off of there. In that case, there you want to fork it and make it work. That's the only subtlety associated with remixing. But this is a very powerful approach in order to deal with the fact that we deal with a community project where the point is to share and facilitate the sharing of content effectively on our corpus so that everyone can benefit from it. And remixing and transclusion is a key component in order to facilitate that. So I digress. This thing is finished. It deleted a few sections that I'd done before, and then that's about it. I will mention one quick thing before I close this thing off, since it's close to the end of the hour, and that is what I skipped over, which was the auto number option. And the auto number option currently, and this is going to be updated soon, gives you the ability in order to say you want to make chapters as a prefix or sections or numbers. Or a range for the sections. The new version will allow people to type in anything they want instead of a preset value. You can decide what you want your chapters to start at and what your section numbers to start at. So for example, it's not unheard of that people have a second volume of a book and they may want the first chapter of that new book, independent book, to start at chapter 15 instead of chapter 1, like it were a standalone book or the first version of that series. The guide depth is not important. And I'm just going to leave it at that. And that's it. So the Remixer is an exceedingly powerful tool in order to capitalize on this massive corpus of content that we have here in order to build your book and customize your book, constantly re-updating your book as necessary to achieve the goals that you have in your classroom. I'll leave it at that. I will mention that we have been recording this. I'll be uploading this to YouTube. I've already uploaded 4 last night, so there's a good chance I'll have this uploaded this evening. So those of you that weren't able to attend can actually review the video at your leisure. Unless there are any other questions, I can certainly address them. There's a question for a link to the Remixer. I mentioned that the Remixer is available, Margarita, under more tools for the project that you're creating. However, I did paste a link to the Remixer that you can go to if you want to use it directly, but I recommend using it through the more tools under the conductor page for your project, because it will automatically load up your book and facilitate faster remixing instead of trying to make it so you have to find your book and reload it. So any other questions?